A storm is rising on the world stage, one that pits two very different leaders against each other. On one side, the fiery former U.S. President Donald Trump, pushing his America First vision harder than ever. On the other, the young and determined leader of Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traoré, standing tall for his people and refusing to bow. This is not just about tariffs or trade numbers. It's about dignity. It's about a small African nation daring to push back against the world's largest economy. For decades, countries like Burkina Faso have been forced to accept rules written thousands of miles away, rules that kept them dependent and weak. But under Traoré, something new is happening. For the first time, Burkina Faso is saying no. When Trump returned to power in 2024, he unleashed a wave of new tariffs. He said it was to protect American jobs, rebuild factories, and keep wealth inside the United States. But those tariffs landed like a hammer on poor nations. Burkina Faso's cotton, gold, shea butter, and food products suddenly became too expensive for U.S. buyers. Overnight, farmers lost contracts, industries shrank, and export earnings collapsed. What Washington called policy felt to Ouagadougou like economic warfare. But Ibrahim Traoré refused to bend. Instead, he turned the crisis into a fight for sovereignty. He stood before the United Nations and called the tariffs what they were, modern colonialism. His words echoed far beyond the chamber. Africa will no longer accept chains disguised as free trade. At home, he banned luxury U.S. imports and poured resources into local production. Farmers, engineers, and entrepreneurs were given support to replace foreign goods with domestic products. For the first time in decades, ordinary Burkinabe felt part of something bigger. Farmers weren't just feeding families, they were defending the nation. Then came his boldest move, forming the Sahel Economic Sovereignty Alliance with Mali, Niger, Chad, and Guinea. Together, they built a regional market too strong to be easily broken by outside powers. And beyond Africa, Traoré reached out to China, India, Brazil, and Russia, striking trade deals that bypassed Western tariffs and brought in new investments without the usual strings attached. To the West, this was unacceptable. Trump went on television, branding Traoré a dangerous radical, warning that Burkina Faso was destabilizing Africa. U.S. sanctions soon followed, aid suspended, banks restricted, intelligence services watching every move. Western media painted Burkina Faso as reckless, a rogue state on the brink. But instead of breaking, the resistance grew. Across Africa, students, farmers, and workers rallied behind Traoré's message of independence. From Brazil to India, leaders expressed solidarity. Even within Europe, young activists began to chant, "Stand with Burkina." What began as one nation's struggle had turned into a global movement. In Ouagadougou, the mood shifted. People walked with pride. Factories opened. Students studied trade law and engineering with new purpose. Churches and mosques alike prayed for their president's strength. The phrase "Burkina Faso will rise" became a promise whispered in markets, classrooms, and homes. Yet the pressure was real. Inflation climbed. Opposition figures, some tied to foreign interests, warned of disaster. Western embassies stirred quietly in the background, but Traoré pressed on, insisting that freedom was worth the cost. And as the struggle deepened, something powerful began to emerge. For the first time in decades, the global South, countries long silenced in the shadows of empires, saw a leader who would not bow. Burkina Faso had become more than a nation. It had become a symbol. Trump believed his tariffs would force submission. Instead, they sparked rebellion. And now the world must ask, why should small nations forever live under rules they did not write? What happens when they finally push back? This is more than a trade war. It is a turning point. A contest not fought with bombs or armies, but with courage, unity, and an unshakable will. Burkina Faso has chosen the hard path, but it may also be the path that reshapes the future of global power. So let us pause and send a prayer for Burkina Faso, for Africa, and for every small nation fighting to stand tall. May President Ibrahim Traoré find strength and wisdom. May his people hold fast to hope. And may the rise of Africa remind the world that dignity cannot be traded away. Because when Africa rises, the world will change.